And good evening. It's July 4th, 2024, and welcome to another one of our Branches on the Vine with the Bible Project and, of course, the Sermon on the Mount series. So the Bible Project, they created this series to cover an entire year, right? Every 5 weeks, they're going to release another major episode. And we're going to take some time to discuss each of those episodes and some other creative topics that they present. Because the videos that we're going to be discussing, they're really just the tip of the iceberg. They're part of this learning series that I highly recommend, and they can all be found on the Bible Project app. The link to that is in the description. So, welcome this evening to episode 6 of Sermon on the Mount. Don't give, pray, or fast in public on the Dusty Feet. And before we forget, if you find these kinds of podcasts useful, it's when you click the subscribe button. Those reminders, they just help you. But also, if you think these might be useful to others, that's when you click that like button, because that's the way that YouTube chooses to share these to more people, if they wish. So this sermon, again, is found in Matthew 5 through 7, and of course for me, it's the seminal moment in the teachings of Jesus. This is his longest, deepest, widest teaching that we have recorded in all of Scripture. And it covers things that we like to talk about, but deep down, I think we really have challenges living. So, Sermon on the Mount, Episode 6, Don't Give, Pray, or Fast in Public. And this is part 1 of 4 for us. So, let's watch the video. Let's see where it takes us. Enjoy.
Jesus of Nazareth, one of the most influential people in history, taught that the truly good life flows out of a close, intimate relationship with the creator of the universe.
Yeah, Jesus believed this was the ultimate treasure of human existence, receiving God's love. And Jesus said, doing righteousness is our response by giving that love back out to others.
Now, Jesus also lived in a culture where showing your devotion to God publicly will increase your reputation. So, it would be easy to turn your intimacy with God into a performance to get public praise.
Exactly. And so, in a group of his teachings called the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus warns his followers about that temptation.
Be careful that you don't do your righteousness in front of people for the purpose of being seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in the skies. So, acting like you're close with God might gain you social status or applause.
But, Jesus says, that's really all you're going to get. Jesus describes this performance as being a hypocrite, which comes from the Greek word hypokrites, which refers to a stage actor putting on a show.
So, how can I know if I'm becoming a hypocrite? I mean, that seems like an easy trap.
Yeah, it's super easy. And so Jesus offers 3 case studies. He uses the 3 most common ways in his day that Jewish people expressed their devotion to God, beginning with generosity.
So then, when you give generously to those in need, don't signal it with a trumpet, as the hypocrites do in the town squares or streets. They do that to be honored by people. And I tell you the truth, they have fully received their reward.
So, in Jesus' culture, public displays of generosity were a way to celebrate God's generous love. But they could also become a way to promote yourself.
So Jesus offers an alternative. When you give generously to those in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving is done privately. And your Father who sees what is done in private, he will fully reward you.
So, one foolproof way to make sure your generosity is really done out of love is to do it in ways other people can't see.
But didn't Jesus also teach to let your light and good deeds shine as an example for others?
Well, yes. When you consider all of Jesus' teachings on generosity, we see he regularly called his followers to give generously because it displays the heartbeat of God's love. But be careful and self-critical, he says. If there's even a hint of inner hypocrisy, it's probably wise to do your giving in private.
It would be easier if Jesus just gave one clear rule.
Maybe, but what he's given us is wisdom, and that forces us to cultivate a closer relationship with God, trusting that he'll show us when to give in private or more publicly. He makes the same point in his second case study about prayer.
And when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who love to pray while standing where people gather or on street corners so that they can be seen by people. I tell you the truth, they have fully received their reward.
In Jesus' culture, most Jewish people stopped whatever they were doing multiple times a day, and they prayed a traditional prayer from the Torah called the Shema. Jesus himself was known for his consistent devotion to prayer. But be careful, he says, because even your prayer habits can become a strategy for public praise.
Right, I can imagine the temptation to conveniently find yourself on a busy street corner when prayer time comes. I mean, people will think I'm really devout.
And if that's what you're after, congratulations. You will probably get people's admiration, but that's all. So Jesus suggests a different way.
But when you pray, go into a room, shut the door, so you can pray to your Father in private. And your Father, who can see what's done in private, he will reward you.
Prayer is about spending time with God, sharing your thoughts and concerns, and trusting that he will hear and respond. The easiest way to check your motives for praying is to do it when no one can see. But again, this is not a rule, it's wisdom. Jesus prayed alone and also together with his followers. Both are important ways of connecting to God.
The third example Jesus gives is about fasting. When you all fast, don't look gloomy like the hypocrites. They make their faces look disfigured, so their fasting will be seen by others. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward.
So fasting is a way of praying with your body by withholding your own physical needs like food and drink, and then inviting God's presence to meet you in that place of need.
But even fasting can be used as a performance.
Yes, so be careful, like Jesus says.
But when you fast, anoint your head with oil, wash your face, so your fasting isn't visible to anyone except your Father in private, and he will reward you.
Now, notice that in all three cases, Jesus does not say to ditch these practices.
Right, express your devotion, but find creative ways to do it so that you don't treat God's love like a trophy.
Jesus knows that his followers will be most effective in the world when they care the least about their social standing, because their ultimate goal is simply to know and be known by the God of generous love.
We just looked at 3 warnings for those committed to a relationship with God. And one of those was about prayer.
Next, we'll look at the very center of the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus teaches his followers how to pray.
So, what'd you think? Right? So, one of the things that I like about the Bible Project videos, I mean, as a whole, is that they're launching points. They just get the ball rolling, right? Very seldom is the entire teaching there, the entire point made. This is but the beginning of a much larger discussion. So I highly suggest that you take advantage of their app, because they tie in other videos, visual commentary, and podcasts for lengthier discussion. But these from the Sermon on the Mount, the tip of the iceberg. So let's look underwater. Let's see what we might find. So on the Bible Project website, they have this particular video, and it's subtitled Warnings About Religious Practices. I kind of like that subtext, a bit of a warning about religious practice, right? We might also use the word traditions. Because this is part of what we're talking about here with this particular point, right, that Jesus is talking about, is about what other people see in how we portray our beliefs. We express our traditions. Catch what I said? How we portray our religious experiences, how we express our traditions. So some of the ways that we like to do this, or maybe say don't do that, that's what we're going to be talking about. Because what we do, in light of what Jesus is addressing here, we're going to look at those with these 3 case points. So we're going to break down these 3 points. We're going to try to wrap them up a little bit, and we're going to address them in the context of how we tend to do them, maybe even today. But it's going to be uncomfortable because we're going to ask questions, as we often do here, with something we read, and then we say, well, that was for them, but it's not for me. Because that can't be me, because I'm thinking differently. I'm not one of those Jewish religious leaders, right? Or those other pious people. And I think it could that they maybe were thinking the same way that we do at times. It's an uncomfortable point to think about, really, that a practice, we often call them traditions, that we would be doing, and it's something that aligns with some of these things that Jesus was talking and focusing on, and then what do we think about it? So another point we're going to talk about, this is going to be fun, is another subtitle that the Bible Project uses with this video. You're going to find it on the YouTube page. And it says, Learning the Wisdom of Jesus' Advice, right? The wisdom of Jesus' advice. I like that a lot, but at the same time, I think we might have a problem. Because we need to really think about maybe how we view or how we perceive advice. Because when we tie in wisdom and advice together, we tie them together, that's when it gets interesting. Okay, I don't want to go too much on a left field tangent here, but I kind of want us to remember that we also get, and what the Bible Project points out, I like this point too, is that we also get wisdom from Torah, right? I just want us to be careful as we address preconceived ideas about what we might see between advice and wisdom. Because what baggage do we bring? That'll be the point that's going to come up a few times in this study. It's the way we use those words today. How do we view wisdom? How do we view advice? Because I think today, our general concept of advice is, I can take it or leave it. You just give me some advice and I'm like, okay, I'll take some of it and I'll leave some of it. But I'm not sure that's how it works with God's wisdom and Jesus' wisdom, that it's just advice. I must admit, though, that it's a very culturally leveraged thought, especially in today's climate. But I think maybe it's more about how and why we take this wisdom, and then how do we apply it to us. Just thought of this. How do we take this advice that God gives us, and do we really then, in that, do we really just take it or leave it, right? Is it just something that we go, yeah, well, that works for me, thanks God. That doesn't work for me, thanks God, and I'll take that under advisement. Because it's an interesting thought to ponder. I guess I'm just going to leave that amongst yourselves to talk about it. Ponder that point more, a wee bit more. So one of the points that Tim brings up is that it's the ultimate point of our lives to receive God's love. I'll bite. And yet also, when we express that love, because when we receive, God expects us to express. So we express that love back, that God's love, to others. So we receive love from God, and then we express that love from God. So I guess it's a fair question, not to back up too much, but God's wisdom and Jesus' wisdom, is that an expression of his love for us? His love for us through that wisdom. Then if it does, how do we express that to others? So we get to express this to others because we've already talked about this in the previous episodes. We've talked a lot about what these particular case studies do and how they reflect on how we do what we do, how we do that. Yeah? But with that in mind, and feel free to use this case studies as reference, because I highly recommend that you look at anything in Torah and find out what doesn't fit under these, right? What doesn't belong. Because that wisdom advice they actually are ways to express it. It's actually the way to love your brother, to love your neighbor as yourself. It's what it might look like. So I'll totally agree, 100%, that some of it is going to look different today than then, because with Hear Us in now 2024, and especially for me in Pooler, Georgia. Because I'm not in the wilderness in Egypt, or I'm not getting ready to go in the land, and then eventually in that promised land. Yet, that set of instructions, the how to love me, this is God saying, and how to express that to others, that way of life, that wisdom brings life. So how do we treat God? And how do we treat others? I think that's important. But what had become in practice that expression, now it had become status. Yes, it's important, but now it's a status symbol. It's all about me. It's an interesting thought, really, isn't it? Let me show you how much I love you, God and others, so that everybody can see it. Because that goes both ways. Let everyone see how much I love God. Let everyone see how much I love God in public. And then, possibly, how much I love you and how much I express that in public. So, the fun part is we're going to get to these three parts. We're going to have some interesting challenges because, again, it's going to lead some uncomfortable thoughts, and we're going to bring them up. And then you're going to talk amongst yourselves. Because as we work through how defensive we can be about some of these ways to love others and love God, we do that. But how it's seen not only by our individual religious communities, but also those communities around us, right? So we're at the beginning, where we're talking about showing your devotion to God publicly. And the words that they used was hypocrite, right? Interesting, because we have a lot of baggage and stigma that goes into that word, and we carry around a lot. But that's not the original meaning, right? It was actually a very benign term, right? It's just the term of an actor. Somebody that was portraying a part that just wasn't them. Was for the sake of the performance, the sake of the story. They were playing a part in a play. It's because they didn't have movies back then. But it's fine to be in a play. Maybe they even had today what we'd call musicals. I love musicals. But our point here is that the context of Jesus' time, that he's referring to them, these leaders, these religious leaders, as actors. They're acting the part, but not living the part. The line is blurred between fiction and reality. Don't be an actor, just knowing the lines, just knowing the blocking. But be this. Be what you're claiming to be. This was the same claim that the prophets of old said to the children of Israel before the diaspora, before they were carried away. You're saying it and you're doing it, but there's no heart element. You're not living it. And because if you're not, in God's perspective, I'd rather not see this play at all. Don't just play the part. Just learn the lines, but live it. Embrace the wisdom advice, as Tim puts it. Because hypocrite, it comes with a lot of baggage. But more simply put, honestly, just don't act it, live it. Because remember, we're talking about expressing our love to God and to others, but we're doing it His way. Because the focus, it's always been on God's framework, His wisdom, because it's not about ourselves. It is very much outward focused, yet as we're going to see in these next episodes, it's very inward motivated. So remember, description below is a link to the folks at the Bible Project and a link to the app so you can follow along and see each one as they premiere, and of course, all those original topics that they discuss. Because this will continue to be, I believe, an exciting and thought-provoking journey in the Sermon on the Mount. I just wonder what else we're going to continue to uncover. So, thanks with us tonight with the Sermon on the Mount on another edition of The Dusty Feet.